Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. Today, we're excited to have Ryan Marrinan from 3M Collision join us. With over 25 years of experience in the body shop industry, Ryan is a lead trainer at 3M, known for his insightful instructional videos on YouTube, many of which I'm personally addicted to now, along with providing all kinds of education on body repair. This episode also kicks off a special two-part series. First, we're going to hear from Ryan, and then we're going to hear from his coworker and teammate, Jason Garfoot. Ryan, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, I appreciate you bringing me on here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation here today.
Yeah, our pre-show meeting was a lot of fun in getting to know you and the team, and a lot of banter back and forth, which is always fun. But at the end of the day, what you're doing at 3M is pretty phenomenal. There's a lot of really, really good education that you're putting out there. And as I mentioned in the intro, I was running through a lot of the YouTube videos and kind of picking a lot of stuff up. I was kind of geeking out over everything that you were putting out. So it's really, really good education.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as we build content and we're looking at some of these videos, arguably, you sometimes wonder if some of this content gets too simple. But what we find a lot, throughout, whether it's in training in person or I'm out in the shops working with technicians, is that it's really the mistakes come from the simple things that get skipped and missed. And so when you start from building that foundational understanding, and really talking more about the why of what you're doing and how it works and everything else, it really builds good content that resonates with many people.
Yeah, and very easy to understand. The visuals that you have, especially on the YouTube side, are phenomenal. And I had a very specific example that I was telling Ryan ahead of the show, and that I was applying seam sealer for the first time. I didn't grow up on the collision side, was far more on the repair side. And it was doing it with a friend of mine who's been in the collision industry forever. And he did one side of this Jeep that we're working on, and his side looked perfect, looked amazing. And then he said, okay, you're going to do this other side. And I did it, and I was very annoyed that I couldn't do it to his level. And little did I think at the time, here's him who's been doing it for 40 years, and I just happened to be doing seam sealer that day. So I think even as you're creating content, there probably are a lot of people in my position that are doing it for the first time or seeing this type of content for the first time. And it is really, really helpful. And just being able to have some base level understanding of what I'm doing. I really wish I would have seen your video prior to me actually doing it. But it was really, really helpful to watch that, even though it was after the fact.
Well, I appreciate that. It's one of the things that as a technician, I prided myself in very much. So it's sort of that final look and appearance that customers see when they pick up their cars, right? They want to make sure that the paint looks shiny and cute. They don't really know that the bodywork is straight or not. They just see smooth. They see, polished. And when they start opening up the panels and the doors, they want everything to look exactly the way it originally did. So it's interesting, now that if I ever get a chance to see your Jeep, I'll know exactly which side you fixed. But I think as you saw when you were doing that, a lot of people take pride in what they do. We work with our hands. We're very prideful people, and we want the world to see, how, good we are. In some cases, it can be a little bit humbling when you realize, like, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. And that's really when it comes to being able to teach and train or build videos and content. It's never about the fact that I think I'm, the smartest or the best, because I'm not. I firmly believe, like, you need to be learning every single day. If you're not learning, you're going the wrong direction. And this is one area that a lot of technicians that I've spoken to have said similar to what you said. Like, man, I thought I was doing a pretty good job. Like, your videos really helped. Your training definitely helps. And I can't wait to get back to the shop and try it again or do it differently and see that end result, because it's whether the customer sees it or not, it's something that you can be proud of, long term.
Yeah. So did you start off as a technician then?
Yeah. So actually, I cut my teeth working on street rods. One of my best friends to this day got me into it. Him and his dad sort of, we were looking for stuff to do, freshmen in high school, and didn't want to stay, get into trouble and that whole scene. So we pushed a 1940 Chevrolet 2-door coupe into the garage, and we just started working on it with no understanding of what we were doing. And I'm pretty sure his dad did it just so he could get some humor out of his day to day watching us work. He would help kind of guide us and make sure we weren't going to kill ourselves. But that's really how I cut my teeth. And that whole hands-on experience, like we've been talking about, is really, to me, seeing like, wow, I created that, or I can do that, or wanting to learn more about it, is where I got into, the collision side. Had a student in school, classmate rather, that I was going to school with. He's like, hey, my dad teaches collision repair. Maybe you should talk to him. And so ended up getting into a very good program through General Motors, GM. And I've been on the collision technician side my entire life. I had the option to go to be a painter. I was doing some combo work while I was in school. And I hate scuffing bumpers. I really, really can't stress how much scuffing bumpers is terrible. And I don't like masking cars. And so it's the two things that you do as a painter day in and day out. It's just, I like the jigsaw puzzle. I like the complexity. Unfortunately, painters make a lot more money in some cases, but I think I did pretty well. So I chose the body side and stayed with that my entire career as a technician. And that's why today I still teach the body side. I find it to be the most intriguing part of the repair process.
I think what's fascinating is the tie to that early days thing that you had, right? The project that you had that really kind of kept your interest in the industry. And I think you see a lot of car clubs out there, and you see a lot of car shows that do a really, really good job at trying to bring in that next generation and knowing the importance of appealing to somebody that's younger. And I think a lot of times you'll hear, especially maybe older generations right now, say, well, these young kids, they don't want to be involved in what it is that we're doing. And I think through my eyes, it's almost that we just don't give these kids enough exposure to scenarios like you went through, right? Where you did get to go work on a project. And I think in a lot of ways that makes you curious for more. That makes you want to understand how to do things more. And those early days when you're joking around about getting your butt kicked in the garage, I think we've all been there. And that is something that almost humbles you to the point to say, hey, you do need a little bit more education. You do need to know a little bit more about this. And I think our industry in some ways does a fantastic job of kind of creating those visuals to appeal to that younger person. But I also think there's a lot of room for improvement, right? How do we appeal to that younger generation and show them the cool parts of the industry that really kind of become really attractive to somebody to say, hey, maybe this is my path, and maybe, I've got some level of an artistic mindset, or maybe more of just a hands-on mindset, but knowing that there's a fit for you in this industry. And just having that first project can go so far to be able to get their hands on something to really almost just spark that interest to start with.
Yeah, and I think that's more difficult, surprisingly, today, is just as you mentioned, like there's not, and our world's different, let's be honest. Since the time that you and I were kids, we didn't have social media, we didn't have cell phones. I mean, many of us didn't have Nintendo 64s or Ataris. Like, yes, we are that old, sadly. But my interest was sparked, before my buddy got me into actually, building cars. Like it sounds kind of weird, but remember the TV show Home Improvement?
I do. Tim Allen.
Yes, that show is actually what originally sparked my interest in cars. I actually watched that show not just for the humor, but I wanted to see where he was at on his projects. And as a kid, I was like, God, it'd be so cool to have a car like that and be able to build it. And then, my buddy Drew and his dad getting me involved and doing these things, it was like just a fire of passion. And I think with, parents today, I didn't come from a car family. My parents weren't involved in cars. It was not a thing. I think, that whole, it takes a community to raise, a child. if you've got a friend, a friend of your daughter, friend of your son or whatever, invite them along. Like going, for me, it's always been like, I want to see the end result. And it's like, that's what I want. Okay, now let's back up and how do I get there? And that was really the path that kind of got me going on cars. Was like, I knew what I wanted. I wanted to have the cool car. And so today, in today's world, I've got a cool street rod of my own. Anytime a kid asks to sit in it, take a picture with it, I'll let them rev up the motors. Anytime at a car show, a kid, my daughter at a very young age asked me once, she's like, Dad, why do you always rev your motor when a kid yells, rev it up? I was like, because I was that kid. I was that kid. I wanted to see, how much enjoyment and that smile. And so I get a lot of enthusiasm out of that when I see kids like have that interest, because I don't think it's something that they're exposed to enough of, right? They go to school, they get exposed to a lot of things that may not be, beneficial to their long-term, future goals. And I think another thing too is, both parents, mentors, and even, young students that might be watching this, you got to be open to a lot of opportunities. And that's the one thing in the collision, space, or even the automotive space, is there's so many opportunities. It doesn't have to be turning wrenches. It doesn't have to be, spreading body filler. It doesn't necessarily have to be those things. It's great. I loved it. I still do it. I still build cars for myself. I actually just restored a Jeep for my mom. It was a YJ.
Nice.
Did a restoration on that. But so things that I still love, and my daughters are, they're teenagers now. I've got a sophomore and a junior in high school, and one of them's very much into the things that I'm into. So when I'm in the garage, teaching her how to weld and do things, it's what she wants. So I would say, expose, give your kids, give your kids friends opportunities to just see and experience and try different things. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and really just think the other thing too is, you may not be interested in it, but they may be. And so just try to provide them the opportunities or connections with people. Like I said, if you're at a car show and you got questions, ask the car owner. I mean, we all are more than happy to talk about our cars and how we got there and what we did to it, and ask these, answer the little kids' questions. Don't ignore them. I think we'd see a lot more interest in our industries if we showed them the more positive side of things, and the really the cool factor. It's not about the dirt and the grime and the grease. It's about the end result, something that you can be proud of and that you built. And I think that's really lacking today.
Yeah. And is that ever a cool point? Because I think some of the coolest things I've seen at car shows when I go are when you have that younger person talking to, maybe that older person that, they've worked a long time on their hot rod and they've got it in good shape. And I've had kind of overheard stories and even had some family friends. Honestly, at some level, it was kind of my experience too, where when that kid shows genuine interest, and then that person that's been in it for a long time says, hey, you know what, why don't you come over to the shop sometime? You can help me out. And that might be that first time that kid's going to get exposure, or maybe they don't have access to tools or some of the things that you need to be able to do some of these repairs. But being able to go and learn alongside somebody, I was fortunate enough when I was growing up to have a few people in our little town that would say, hey, come on over, you can help us do this. And if it was nothing other than just sitting back and watching them, it was so cool just to be in the shop and really just kind of, hearing that shop talk and just, hearing how their plan is going and everything like that. And it just, I think there's so much value in that scenario too, where you just, you get that person that's been around it for a long time, has a passion for cars, and then says, hey, come on over to the shop. I'll try to teach you some things. And I just think that's one of the coolest parts about our industry, about this car community, is that there are a lot of people that are willing to kind of share their knowledge and help a younger person out.
Yeah. And that's the key right there, right? Is you got to be willing to share. And I think especially when you get into like the shop level, there needs to be some understanding that these younger kids that are coming in, they're not the most skilled, they're not the most knowledgeable, but we were there at one point. I've asked some pretty dumb questions in my career that I look back now and it's like, God, I've had some very good mentors. Gary was, he's retired now, but he was one of a great mentor that I think he, again, probably just got a lot of humor out of some of the dumb stuff I would say or some of the dumb stuff I would do, but always willing to take the time to make sure that I understood what it was that I was doing, make sure that it was being done right. And I think that there's just, unfortunately, there's some closed mindedness in our industries where they're just like, hey man, you're affecting my paycheck, or, I got to get out of here. Like I've been here. I don't have time for you right now. I really think that if you take a step back and look at that investment, of time, and I've been fortunate enough to mentor some technicians in my career as a tech myself. Some of those relationships I still have to this day. I duck hunt with some of them. I regularly meet. There's one guy I use in particular. His name is Alex. He works at a shop here still locally in Minnesota. He was probably one of my favorite mentees that I had, just because he got along with me so well with my personality. I'm a little bit of a smarty pants. But he learned a lot, and he became a very exceptional technician and still is to this day. And so every time I get a chance, I brag about that, because it was, for me, it's kind of like, when you're prideful about a project that you completed, right? A motor that you rebuilt, a quarter panel that you put on, or a restoration that came out just the way you wanted it. It's nice to be able to look back and say like, hey, I know this technician. When he came in, like, Alex was a diesel mechanic and decided he wanted to jump over to the collision side. Like, what? He came to me, I was like, well, this isn't going to work out at all. This is not going to work. But he had that eagerness, he had that drive and that ambition. And for me to look back on that and be like, God, I mentored that kid, and I taught them how to do this. And I look at my mentors, and when I get a chance to, chat with them on social media and some other things, I always, thank them, tell them, how much they, their advice or their, friendship or whatever it might be really meant to me. Cause it's really driven me to where I'm at today. And that's one of the focuses that I look at each and every day that I come to work now, is like, how am I going to make this industry better? How am I going to make the shops better? How am I going to make this individual, better at what they do, while also making it fun?
Yeah, I think that's some of the legacy building type of things that maybe a lot of people on the technical side don't think about, and the level of impact that they have, especially on a young person, is pretty astronomical. And that impact could be negative or positive. If that technician is going in with a negative attitude, that might rub off on that young technician. Whereas if you do have somebody that's successful in showing you the ropes and showing you maybe easier way to do things, there's just so much impact that an experienced technician has on a young person. And at some level, I don't know that they fully comprehend that, right? A technician, good or bad, has a deep, profound impact on a young person. And I, like you, still look back to my mentors and the people that helped me in the industry, and I still talk about them a lot, even on something like this podcast, where they did have a huge, huge impact on me. So I think you're absolutely right there. It is something that, if you're an experienced tech out there and you're listening to this, don't discount how much of an impact you're having on not only somebody's working life, but their life in general, and how happy they are moving forward. It's immense.
Yeah. That's another thing too, is you're building friendships, right? You're building personal relationships. You're there to help teach them, hopefully, and they're wanting to learn from you. But it really is, you essentially become kind of a life coach in some cases. You become that kind of go-to person. And when you get into the younger generation, one of the things that we talk a lot about it, the science of why. And one of the things that, I discovered, and I despise reading. Anybody that knows me, I don't like reading. Unfortunately, I do a lot of reading for my job. And now I do a lot of reading for fun. I don't quite understand that, but one of the things that I was studying a few years ago as we were developing sort of this training team was trying to understand the mindset of just people. And one thing I came across that I dove deeply into was actually something Jordan Peterson talked about, is some way, somehow along the road, we got away from allowing kids to ask why, right? It was just do it because I told you, or do it this way because that's the way I've always done it, or just listen to me because I'm your dad, or I'm your mom, or I'm your uncle, or I'm smarter than you, I'm older than you. And we stopped allowing this question of why. And I was that kid where I was just like, well, why? Why? And you think of it as a parent, right? When your kids are little, it's like, God, you're just driving me nuts. Can I have 5 minutes alone?
We've all been there.
But those are going to be very impactful things, because that why is when you get older, and that's where your success comes from. Like, I've achieved this level of success, but I want to be here. And how do I do it? And tell me why that's important, or tell me why you did it this way and not that way. And I think, as you know, when you look at how mentors sometimes, take on a mentee, and maybe they're voluntold, where the shop owner's like, hey man, see that guy? Make him a technician. I don't care how you do it, just do it. They don't get taught a lot of the finer details of whatever it might be, right? What is the importance of a torque wrench, and what does it do? It's just, hey man, here's a torque wrench, set it to 70 and just tighten all of those in this order. Here's body filler, add that hardener, mix it up, spread it on the car. Like, it just works. I don't know what to tell you. Answering that question of why is really where I think we develop young minds and we need them to start thinking. That's the other thing too, is I don't think that we're encouraging the younger generations to engage through their own thought process. We're teaching them how to think, we're teaching them what to think, not how to think. And I think that's extremely important, because anybody that was a mentee underneath me, every time they came to me with a problem, I always approached it like, well, you just messed that up. I don't know what to tell. What do you think? And I would just start asking them, like, what do you think you did wrong here? Because it looks terrible. And I would just, almost in a sense, you just sort of beat them down until they finally realized, like, I'm trying to challenge you to think about it. If I just give you the answers, you're never going to be able to figure it out for yourself. You'll always just resort back to, that's how I was told, rather than, one of the things in the collision space is engineering, design, development. It's a jigsaw puzzle, right? If you laid a jigsaw puzzle out on the table and your dad's never done it before, and you ask him, like, how do you do this? You'd be like, I don't know. We got to figure it out. Right. But if the lawnmower breaks down in the yard and he's like, well, what do we do? It's no longer, I don't know, we'll figure it out. It's, I'll bring it somewhere. And it's like, maybe your kid's that person that's going to figure it out. So let's go through a process of, analysis here and understanding, like, okay, you need air, you need fuel, you need spark. These three things create a motor to run. And if you can break it down and help them understand it, it gets them, it'll trigger certain things in their brain that gets them thinking a different way. And sometimes getting them to think a different way about something is really where the growth and the learning comes from. And that's what I really find most intriguing, is just being able to ask questions, explain the why, going back to like researching. And if you're going to be a mentor, hopefully you know more than the person you're you're mentoring, because if you don't, then you should be paying attention. That's the other thing, is you have to, as a mentor, you have to always be learning yourself. You're not the smartest person in the room. Be open all the time to learning.
I think at some level, and for me growing up in a shop, that was something that I really struggled to get my hands around, was that, they would just basically, the other technicians would say, well, you need to get your butt kicked in order to learn this. And I wish I would have had a better understanding, or maybe more patience as a young technician in that reasoning as to why. And at times I think maybe some of the more experienced technicians weren't overly good at communicating the why. They're just like, hey, I got my butt kicked, you need to get your butt kicked too. But in reality, it is a lot of, thinking through a problem and being able to work through that problem. And, I think the best shops right now that I see are patient with their young people and will give them the time to be able to learn without maybe the pressures of, you're supposed to have this job done in a certain amount of time, just fully knowing, hey, they're going to get their tail whipped here a few times until they figure it out. And then I think we've all seen it over and over again, where when that light bulb clicks with somebody and they have gotten beat up a few times on a certain kind of job, and then all of a sudden that clicks because they've now thought it through a little bit more, and now they're comfortable and maybe even confident in the job that they're doing. But it's really hard, and from a technician standpoint, if you've done it for a long time and you've got good knowledge, and if you can just maybe shift the way you talk to a young technician in that moment, to not just say, hey, I got my butt kicked when I was younger, so you're going to have to do the same, but maybe just take a few minutes to say, here's why you need to get your butt kicked. This is what you need to do in order to truly understand and comprehend a system. And you had mentioned earlier the learning how to learn, essentially, right? And I think that was a really hard thing for me to come to terms with. Today, this morning, actually, was my son's first day at school, and I had that discussion with him going into school, because he's kind of like, I don't really, I was having a great summer and this kind of sucks going back to school. And so on the ride into school this morning, I talked to him about the importance of, if you get into a tough math problem, you have to work your way through it, because if you just take it at its surface level, just trying to get the quick answer, you're doing yourself a disservice by not training yourself to think through something. And so as you're talking about that, it's so funny, because that's what I was talking to my son about this morning. And I think it's really, really critical that we understand that with young technicians, and we communicate that to them, that it's not just because I had to go through the hard times. It's just, in any job that you're ever going to do that takes any skill, you're going to have to work through some of the stuff, and you're going to have to learn it. And it kind of just takes going through it. Otherwise, you're not going to have a full understanding of it.
And that's a very important point that you just made, is it's going to take time to learn it. Right. And I look back at, when I was young, starting out, and I became, a journeyman working on my own, success doesn't come overnight. The money doesn't come overnight. I worked, many people can attest to this. I worked 15-hour days, 6 days a week. I was fortunate enough to have an employer who trusted me. I had a key to the facility. My biggest thing was I wanted to make sure that I was going to do it right before I got fast. And I talk about that a lot with experienced technicians and with young technicians, that the important thing is that we're doing it, the right way. The speed will come over time, but if you're not good at it and you're just cutting corners to make the paycheck, I think that's one thing that young technicians, if you're looking to be an apprentice, or you are an apprentice now, just I call it, you got to have your head on a swivel. You got to be a sponge. There's things you will learn from bad technicians. Hopefully you understand that they're, maybe not doing things the right way or the way it should be done. And those are sometimes good things to learn too. But, hopefully you were fortunate enough to get paired with somebody who actually does know what they're doing. And if you are somebody that's teaching somebody and they ask a question, and I challenge all young, don't feel foolish. One of the things that I always set the grounds with any apprentice, even now when I have tech aides or shop help with us that are part of the training team, I lay out my personality up front. Like, I'm very straightforward. I'm very black and white. I have a kind of smart ass personality. I'm going to challenge you, and I want you to challenge me. And so I might appear to, or you might get the impression I'm in a bad mood. Maybe I am, but it's not directed at you. So you just have to kind of roll with it. And so I would set that precedent up front with students and with my mentees, and just say, like, listen, man, you have to ask questions. And if you're a mentor and you get asked a question you don't know, that's your indication that you yourself have more to learn. And so you have to yourself, going back to that, you have to pursue that and understand, because if you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it well enough. And so if your job is heavy frame repair, and you're putting in a frame rail and you can't explain it to anybody that walks in the shop of why you're doing this in less than 30 seconds, then you don't understand it yourself, right? If you can't understand the inner workings of a transmission and be able to explain them how this works, and I don't have any clue how the inner workings of a transmission works, so I'd be the last person to ask about that. But you get my point, where it's like you have to be able to explain it, because this is where it's that you want to be, the go-to for the one with the answers. You want to be proud of what it is that you're developing. In this case, it's this individual. You want to be able to look back and be like, man, I put my best foot forward. I know I did what's right. I also taught this person what's right. So, when you look at those different levels from both sides of, what does it take to give the students those aha moments? Because those are the most fun. When you see the light bulb go off, to me, that's the most thrilling. When you can explain it and they don't understand it. So you change gears and you come at it from a different direction. You show them hands-on, you show them an example, and all of a sudden they go, oh, man, now I get it. It's like, yes, all right. It's encouraging that they got it, but it's important because it's like you do understand it and you can explain it simply enough. And that's really what's, going to be the most important thing. And what we look at when we, every day that I go in to teach a new class, it's, sort of just give me the patience, give me the time and the understanding that I don't know everything, that I'm here to learn just as much as they are. And I think that's the biggest thing as a teacher that I have to constantly search for is patience with students, patience with everything, just because it can get frustrating and the days can get long, but it requires work. And so if you're young, work. Work, man. I came from a hardworking blue collar family. I to this day, it's still just like, yeah, you got to take your bumps and bruises, as you're saying. Like there's some things, even with my kids, I'm like, I don't know, I know the answer, but you're gonna have to figure it out, And I watched my youngest do a project this summer, and she actually got to a point where I was like, dude, I can help you here. And she's like, no, I want to learn it. Let me learn it. I'll figure it out. So it's like, okay,
that's how you landed, like with your trainings, right? That she wanted to figure it out. Did you know that WrenchWay offers free solutions to help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors connect with local shops and dealerships? Nearly 700 schools across the country have used WrenchWay to successfully get resources and support for their classrooms, such as tool and equipment donations, advisory committee members, shop tours and guest speakers, and much, much more. It's an easy way to bring education and industry together to promote and improve careers in automotive and diesel. There's no obligation, hidden costs, or fees. WrenchWay will always be free for instructors to use. Visit wrenchway.com and click on the For Schools link under Solutions to learn more and sign up. Direct link is in the show notes. I led with the intro about talking about you as a lead trainer at 3M, and I probably didn't do a good enough job of talking about that or allowing you to talk about that. Tell us a little bit about that side and what you're doing in training for 3M.
Yeah, so we have it's a 3-day program, and so it's intense, to be honest with you. It's many people come in and they're kind of like, oh, it's training, we're going to go through this again. And recently we did a group of college instructors. Every summer we volunteer 2 weeks of our time to college instructors. We give the class away for free, and as long as they can get to St. Paul, we'll teach you. So it's 2 separate weeks. It's not 2 full weeks, but it's 1 full week. It's capped. We have I think we cap it at like 20 per class. But basically one of them gave us the feedback this year. Is pretty interesting. They're like, you just covered in 3 days what takes me 2 semesters. And it's intense. It is, but it's very fun because we train technicians of all levels, all capabilities. From your newest of new, like last week we had a class and we had one student who was actually 2 students. They were very apprehensive during introductions. They're like, well, I've been doing this about 3 months. It's like, great. I'm glad you're here. Like, I can't wait to teach. And then you got another guy in the room. It's like, I've been doing this 42 years. And both of them were very open to learning, and both of them definitely had some humbling experiences. I'd say probably more so the older technician than the newer technician, but our 3-day program, we go through the whole body repair process from start to finish. So we train on, panel sectioning, welding, all the body fillers, adhesives, sealants. And so when I came to 3M 6 years ago, it was one of my tasks was like, we want to develop this training team. And so I worked in portfolio, did everything with adhesives, fillers, coatings, and sealants, while also developing this training program. And we learned a lot along the way. We kind of went through some bumps and some bruises, but we've got to a point now where we have a dedicated facility, 16,000 square feet in St. Paul, that state-of-the-art equipment, state-of-the-art paint booth. We teach multiple classes. We do body, we do paint. We're also going to be kicking off a front office. So we do production managers and estimators, not in the sense that you would think. It's not just writing estimates. We're actually breaking down like, how do you get paid for the different operations and have negotiations and understand more of the hands-on. And that's really the focus of our training is it's hands-on. And we wanted to make sure, as hands-on person myself, the best way I learn is by doing. So when you have a class, like, we can have on the body side, we have a capacity of 24 students. Every 24 of them is doing hands-on. It's not, you do a little bit here and you do a little bit here, and you're all just standing around listening and watching all day long. You are doing hands-on, and it's intense. Usually by the third day, when they come in the morning, they're tired and they're just like, holy cow, I feel like I forgot half the information. It's like, well, hopefully you're taking notes, because day 3 gets a little bit more intense. But by the end of it, what's the most encouraging thing is they're like, man, I wish this was a 5-day course, or how can I come back? I feel like there's still so much I can learn from you guys and from what you're doing. And that, like I said, doing the body repair side and where my passion has been at my entire career, it's fun to instill that knowledge onto technicians of, like I said, all different abilities, all different calibers. We've had transitions from paint to body and body to paint that come in for training. And really at the end of the day, what you leave with is, certifications. We are ICAR, accredited courses. So you do leave with your hands-on credits. But most importantly, you leave with that foundational understanding of, why do you use certain structural adhesives or certain bonding adhesive? Why would you use a filler over a glaze, as an option? Why would you, what's the importance of reinforced fillers, and why are there different types of reinforced fillers? Those are the things that we teach on while they're doing the hands-on, that really resonates, because when they go back to the shop, the goal is that they would, be able to upskill the rest of their coworkers and their management team and say, like, hey guys, we can be doing this better, and here's why. And then that's really like I said, the foundational focus of what we do is just explaining that why.
When I think of 3M, I really immediately think of innovation. And on the collision side, especially, the innovation and the changes in technology and the changes in just the R&D. I've read a lot about 3M over the years, and I have to imagine, as 3M continues to innovate, your teaching style and trying to keep up with that could probably be kind of a challenge, right? Because there could be something that maybe you're teaching on that could change dramatically in a small period of time, just based on all of the hours of R&D that went into something from 3M standpoint. So is that kind of a challenge, staying on top of all of the latest and greatest?
It is, because it's a challenge, and it's also something that I enjoy very much so, because we get included in. I'm included in several different development projects. I'm continuously in contact with our development teams in all the different areas that 3M makes products that go into the the collision repair, paint application, refinishing processes, and working with those R&D developers. Excuse me. We kind of stay on that cutting edge of what's coming. And provide input back from the field. So we take insights from our customers back to our labs and say, hey, they're struggling with this. Is there anything that we're working on that maybe we can provide help with? But I think the biggest driver, besides the R&D that we have, is just our connection to the OEMs, and working so closely with the OEMs on forward-thinking projects about different substrates that may be coming, in future models. 2-3 months ago, I got the chance up in Detroit for 3 days, working with all the OEMs, talking with their engineer teams, trying to better understand, some of their repair procedures, some of the ways that they want things repaired and why. But then also trying to learn about some of these new models and what could 3M be working on to develop. And so it's very exciting. It can make for very long days because the last thing you want to do some days after you're done teaching, 8 hours of collision repair is sit down and talk with a, adhesives expert on what scientifically makes adhesive sticks and why is it designed to fail versus, but it's fun when you teach that to technicians when they come in. And one of the things that I kind of hit them with is like, guys, do you know that adhesives are actually designed to fail? They're not actually designed to hold the car together. And they're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like adhesives hold stuff together. It's like, yes, but in the collision space, they're designed to fail. And here's why. And so when you start breaking that down, they go, oh my God, I've never thought about it like that. We talk about making the body structure more rigid and stronger. In some cases, that may be a good thing, but here's why. Like when I go to Detroit and they talk about like why our vehicles are different than, say Toyota or Honda or whatever, just pick any other brand, even like GM to Ford. When you start talking to some of these engineers, it's like, this is why we designed it this way. And then you go back to the R&D side and it's like, these are why our products work the way they do. Bringing that level of knowledge to a technician helps them, I think, in their day-to-day, and especially when it comes to making better decisions about making the right repairs to put the car back on the road.
That transfer of knowledge also really helps that student out, right? Because you talked about why something was designed a certain way. I had worked for an OE at one point as a territory manager, and that was one of the funny parts was, we'd go in and have a technician working on something, potentially a warranty repair of some type, and just kind of cussing out the engineer, right? Like not even knowing the engineer, just like, why would they design something this way? And I'm like, I don't know. But I had the fortune of being able to just call up the engineer and say, hey, can you walk us through this a little bit? And when you heard their reasoning as to why, it kind of made things come together in that thought process, even for myself, right? Because there were times when I would look at something and see how it was designed and not fully understand or comprehend why it was done that way. And then once you hear kind of the whole story, then it starts to come together. And so I always looked at it, from my standpoint, when working with a technician, if they know why something was done a certain way, then they're not thinking, well, this is stupid. Why would they ever do this? They actually know the reason as to why, and they can move on to actually just trying to make the repair.
Yeah. And that's so it's funny because as a technician, I would always ask why, and it usually got blank stares because not everybody has the direct connection to the OEM or to the engineers themselves. But the scarier part is when you see people making repairs and like, well, this was a stupid idea by the engineer. Like, I'm going to do it this way instead. It's like, oh gosh, one of the things we talk about is like what you're working on, especially in the collision space, you're putting it back on the road to withstand the same or worse accident. And it needs to perform exactly. It needs to manage that crash energy, right? It needs to transfer it, into designated regions of the structural body, away from the passengers, away from certain key elements. And if you decide to play engineer and redesign that car because you think you know better, I promise you, no matter how many of us think that, like, hey, here's a better idea that they should have thought of, these people did think of it. They are highly intelligent people, and they do understand that science of why. So it goes back to the importance of, one of the things that we stress throughout our entire 3-day course is following the OEM repair procedures, the position statements, the bulletins, because there's information out there on how to properly fix that car from start to finish, right? All the products that should be used from the time you start tearing that thing down and cutting into it to the time you're, comes out of the paint booth, you're putting it together and you're, protecting the final step in the corrosion protection process. What is the final step? And then everything in between. Like, the information does exist, and it can make your life a lot easier so you don't have to play the guessing game. You definitely don't want to accept responsibility if you don't know for sure what's going on. But yeah, being part of the R&D, part of the laboratory, that's one of the power engines that 3M offers is, we're developing the products firsthand that are going onto the cars. We're not private labeling. We're not buying stuff from, we're making them. We know how they work. We know, if they fail, we want to know about it. It's rare, but everybody makes mistakes. And so we need to know about it because maybe we can engineer it better. Maybe something can be changed. Or what I usually find is, and I get this a lot when somebody calls me with a complaint, they're like, well, your product sucks. It's like, okay, that may be, but let's go through your process, because 99% of the time it's the application process that's wrong. It's not the product. And I don't care what product you're using. If you don't change your process, switching brands isn't going to change the outcome, because it's truly about, what it is that you're doing. And so in training, when we can teach them, both the right way and the wrong way, and a lot of what we do is we force them to make mistakes, or as I refer to it, it's like, okay, so we're going to do this side wrong, or the way you've been doing it for the last 20 years. And then we're going to do this side right, the way we would recommend that it be done. And we're going to show you and explain to you why as we go through. And so it's 4 hours of building it wrong, building it right, and then describing the difference side by side. When they leave, it's like, oh my God. I've had some students come up to me and technicians come up to me at the end, and they're like, I'm really worried. Like, I've been fixing cars wrong for a very long time. Okay, well, at the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know. And the fact that you're here willing to learn is an important, major first step that not enough people are taking. Not enough shop owners are investing in, is taking that first step of, I need to make sure my guys are trained. Because a better trained technician is going to be a technician that stays around longer because I've invested in them, but it's also going to be security for my brand, my shop, my OE partner. If you're an OEM certified facility, like, I need to make sure that I'm maintaining these relationships, and most importantly, at the end of the day, the customer's safety. It plays a huge, huge role into it. And so when we explain all that, in the course to these technicians, some of them are falling off their chair some of them are overwhelmed. Like I said, that the one, his name is Tommy. I still hear from him every now and then, but he came back after day 2 and he was just like, I didn't sleep at all last night. He's like, I've only been doing this a year and I've already made so many mistakes. It's like, all right, buddy, let's fix it, because your mentor is also teaching you the bad mistakes. So let's fix some of these mistakes, and let's give you the tools and the resources and everything that they build in class, we send back to them. So they're taking notes on all the panels. They're doing, OEM seam sealer replication. So they're building boards that have all the different types and methods. And so they're taking all these notes on the pieces in notebooks and everything. And we ship everything back to the shop that they can use, whether it's negotiations with the insurance company, trying to explain it to an estimator, a production manager, trying to explain it to the owner or the other technicians of, like, guys, I know we've done it this way, but here's what we've been doing wrong and why we should change. And so I think that's another important key aspect of our industry that we need to accept, is that we all need to make some changes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, something you mentioned earlier in the podcast was the scenario where you had an entry-level technician alongside a very experienced technician in the same class. What is your mindset when you're going into teaching that class? Because you probably have some idea going into a class that you're going to have a bunch of different abilities and experience and knowledge kind of combined into one class. How do you put together a class that's really impactful for everybody?
It can be a little bit of a challenge, to be quite honest with you. And why I say a challenge that also tends to be somewhat easy is like I said, we've been developing this program, heavily for the last 6 years, and learning all of these different, how do we teach these different levels? And, one example of that is I had a student show up on day 1, came into the facility, walks over to me, and he's just walks straight up to me, flat out. He's like, I don't want to be here. It's like, oh man, that's too bad. It's like, cause it's 3 days. It's 3 days. And he's like, I said, why don't you want to be here? And he's like, look at you. He's like, what am I going to possibly learn from you? You're like 12 years old. And I went, well, I appreciate it. It's a very good compliment. I promise you I've been around a little bit more than that. And I said, maybe you're here to teach me today. And he's like, well, what? he's like, that sounds stupid. He goes, I'm paying to be here and I'm going to teach you. I was like, hey, I tell you what, if you can teach me more than I can teach you, I'll give you your money back. But I said, if you're willing to listen to what I have to say, I'm definitely willing to listen to what you have to say. So why don't we just give it a try and see how it goes? And by the end of the first day, he didn't want to get back on the shuttle. He had so many questions. He was so engaged, and he's just like, man, I can't wait to come back tomorrow. And what started off being a very apprehensive situation became a very positive one. And so when we go through the introductions, on day one at the beginning, we kind of lay some of the ground rules out. Everybody gets to introduce themselves, their years of experience. We have some fun. We talk about it, like, what was your first car? Most everybody's crashed their first car when they're in the collision space. By the way, it's like we're at like 85% there. So 3M's big on their numbers. We like tracking them. So about 85% of our industry has crashed their first car, and that's why they got into collisions, including myself. So I had to figure out how to fix it. Couldn't afford to pay somebody to do it. But yeah, so then we kind of set the ground rules. And when they realized that, us as instructors, we're real people. We're not, the guy you see on YouTube. We're not the guy that, we don't hold ourselves on pedestals. We don't think we're better than anybody else. We're real technicians just like you, who took it upon ourselves to learn at a higher level and educate ourselves and advance our careers at a higher level, to the point where people were asking, like, I would like you to teach me. I need to learn from you. And so as we continue to learn and pass that knowledge on, we're able to tailor those classes to accommodate students of all different capabilities. And so when we go through the different courses of cutting and grinding, panel sectioning, welding, that's a big one. That it's actually easier to teach a younger technician how to weld than an older one, because I don't have to spend the first 2 hours fixing bad habits and then the next 2.5 hours teaching them the right way. So our own learnings internally over time, and just having that experience and understanding the mindset of a technician, some of their apprehensions, coming in, what they might be, or some of their enthusiasms. We get a lot of enthusiastic people that show up and they're just excited. They're like, man, first time I've ever traveled, first time I'm out of the shop. I'm so excited to be here. I want to learn. I can't believe my owner, sent me here. This is great. And those are just as fun as the guys that are like, man, you can't teach me anything. I'm so much older than you. It's like, well, you were right about one of those things. You are older than me, so let's give it a whirl.
Well, and I think your humbleness and really the ability to share with somebody the need to constantly learn, right? Even if you've been in the industry for 100 years, you're still going to have things that to learn. And going back to what I said earlier about the changes and advancements in technology and everything that has happened in especially the collision side of the industry, there's nobody out there that can't learn something by sitting through a class. And I think the more you can get that mindset, and for you experienced technicians that are listening to this, I'm kind of talking to you here. Whenever you find yourself in that moment where you're like, they're not going to teach me anything, that's when you're not going to learn anything. You have to be open to listening and trying to learn, and truly kind of perfecting your craft. Work on perfecting your craft and getting better. And this knowledge and education is really what kind of gets you to that point, I feel like.
Yeah, and one of the things that we emphasize with each class is, we tell them, challenge us, challenge the instructors. Right? You may know a different way. You may know what you think is a better way. We absolutely love to be challenged. I actually like classes that are a constant challenge, mostly because it's very rare that anybody's outworked me in the research department of understanding this. And that's why, we're here as instructors. I hope that's every instructor that you ever come across. To be quite honest, no matter what trade you're in, I really hope that you get in front of an instructor that puts as much work ethic and determination into making every class a valuable class, from an aspect of, I want you to leave with the like, wow, I feel so much more knowledgeable, so much more empowered, so much more skilled. That's really what we do, in the program, is we're trying to upskill the industry. We're trying to upskill, both the knowledge, the understanding, and then the enthusiasm, because it can be, Not every day is a great day, as you know, Jay. Life's a challenge. This industry is a challenge, but it can be very, very rewarding, and it's just something that I very, very much love doing is teaching, and then just hopefully that wherever you're getting your information from, it's from a reliable source that's knowledgeable.
Something you had mentioned that resonated with me in our prior conversations was really around the power of asking stupid questions. And I've always been a big fan of that because I'm not afraid to ask if I don't fully understand or comprehend something, just because I want to understand it. And even if it comes off as dumb to somebody else, that's going to help me in the long haul if I ask the question. And honestly, I think when I was younger, I wouldn't ask those questions because I didn't want to appear to be stupid. And I think over the over the years, I just stopped caring and just truly wanted to understand how something worked, or truly understand kind of everything about that particular subject. And so, as we were talking, you kind of said you're a fan of those questions as well, right? Of really kind of what might seem like a super basic question that maybe somebody should know, they're asking it because they don't know. And I think being able to attack that at a foundational level helps so much, rather than just skimming over it so you can pass the test, or so that you can say that you had the education, but truly to getting a core understanding. I think those what are perceived as stupid questions are really, really important.
Well, so one area is an example. You're spot on. One example that I can give you that I was just thinking of here is because it happened last week again. And when I kick off a welding class, I use the reference like, how many of you guys, I ask them if they went to tech school, if they didn't, or they just went to a shop. And I call it vertical and breathing, right? Our industry, all trades need people, right? So a lot of shops are just hiring people because they're vertical or they're breathing. And they come in and they're like, listen, don't go to school. We'll teach you everything you need to know. And that's a scary, scary thing, because if you're put with a mentor that doesn't, explain to you the ins and outs of a welder. My favorite thing, it's actually not my favorite thing, but it's my favorite thing because I laugh at it, is when I walk into a shop and I see the welder and it's got the little Uniposk marker dots. And they'll say, like, just set the welder to those two settings. If you can't weld, then you're terrible. And so they force these kids to set it to their settings, which are not right, by the way. If you're using markers and you're marking your welders, I promise you 100% it's not right. I'll prove it to you, it's not right. And so when I kick off a welding class, I start explaining, what is it that you're doing when you're plugging. We go from plugging in a welder all the way. It's a 20-minute conversation from plugging in the welder before you've even picked up the torch. And I've had experienced technicians be like, nobody's explained that to me in 25 years. Like, I had no idea about the care and the maintenance and the setting it up and the changing the wire and checking the contact tips and understanding how the, shielding gas works and the angle of the torch, and the contact angle and all these other things. Nobody's ever explained it. And it's like, I can't wait to get back to the shop and erase those yellow dots off the welder, because that's not the proper way. And it's definitely, when you start learning about the different substrates and what it is that you're doing, it's not an appropriate way. So, I think you need to be able to ask those questions. And, going back to one of the things that we've been seeing a bigger trend on, which is actually encouraging for us, is when we have those classes where you have extreme swings of experience and talent. What's fun as an instructor is when every now and then we get a shop owner that wants feedback. I mean, your feedback is, do you pass the class? So you have to take a knowledge test at the end of each class to get your ICAR credits and your points. But we'll watch the older technicians. I mean, these guys are coming from all over the country. Nobody knows each other in most cases. They'll naturally gravitate towards that mentor mentality. So if they see like a younger guy kind of falling behind on the panel sectioning portion, like, they'll actually step up to the plate. If as instructors were tied up with somebody else, they'll actually step up and they'll start, helping. I find that very, exciting and actually heartwarming, because it's like, okay, there's actually good people left in this world. There's good people left in this industry. And that's really when you can see the dynamic of a class change, and you start seeing those young kids asking more questions And like I said, going back to, you need to be relatable. They need to understand, like, I was in your shoes at one point. The dumbest thing well, it's not the dumbest thing. Let's be honest. I still ask dumb questions, but one of the first stupid questions I can remember is I had just gotten hired on in my first internship. First day on the job, I got stuck on the detail washing cars. And it was like 30 minutes into the day, and I was watching, his name was Romeo. I was watching him cut a core support off a car, and he was drilling spot welds. And I walked over to him and I go, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I'm cutting off a core support." I go, "No, that. What is it you're doing, right? Like, it's a drill, but you're not drilling a hole." And he's like, "You don't know what drilling spot welds are?" I was like, "No."
No.
That's super interesting. And he's like, "Oh my God." He goes, "You'll never make it in this industry." And he started laughing and he walked away. And I was like, I felt really embarrassed. But at the same time, I was like, "Oh, okay." And it was great because Gary, who ended up being my mentor, saw and heard this conversation. He actually came over to me after that and he goes, "Hey man, keep asking. Don't stop. Keep asking."
Love that. Love that.
That was like the encouragement that I needed, right? And that was like that reassurance of like, okay, that may have been stupid to him, but Gary saw that as like, this kid wants to learn and wants to become more knowledgeable. And so whether you're a new student or even an older, technician, because in training it's funny when we go to take a break, they don't understand that we as instructors also need a break. I might need a drink of water. I might need to use the restroom. I might have to reset the room because we're moving on to a whole different exercise. And that's usually where the shy ones, and more often than not, it's the older experienced technicians that are the shy ones. They'll come up and they'll be like, "Hey, I had a question." And then they'll want to sit and take up the whole 15-minute break asking what they should have asked in the larger group. So sometimes, as long as it's not super embarrassing, sometimes when we come back and be like, "Okay, so Gary or Greg over here asked a great question while we're on break, and I wanted to address it with the rest of the class," because I feel like it's knowledge that the rest of the class should know. So I think that goes back to ask why. Go back to just ask why. I mean, at 3M, that's what we do. Whether you see us in the field, in your shop, we've got sales reps and other application engineers that are in the shops, working with us with technicians. But especially if, you come to St. Paul and you get a chance to work with myself, like, I'm going to try to pry it out of you. I want a question out of every single student. And if you sit there quietly in the back row, I usually pick on you first. Because I can walk, my mic is wireless when I'm teaching, so I can walk around the room and everybody will know that you're in the room if you're not participating. At some point you'll learn you have to participate at least once. But that's really what our industry needs, is more of that encouragement to participate. Don't just sit back and accept the norm.
We should have a T-shirt that the world needs more Garys, just based on your line right there. And it is very, very true. I think that scenario is all too familiar for a lot of us that came up in the industry, in having the individual who is almost degrading, but then also having the other person that is willing to help and really wants to have an impact on young people. So, Gary, if you're listening out there, we love you. We need more of you. So, Ryan, I really, really appreciate you taking some time to do this today. I feel like there were so many things that we could have talked about, even over and above what we did talk about, but it was really, really good. I love your story and what you're doing to have a genuine impact on this industry. And thank you for taking some time out today to join me.
Hey, I appreciate it, Jay. And anytime as you know, we can talk for hours and hours on any topic, but it's an industry that I'm very passionate about. I know you're very passionate about it as well. And I hope there's more of us out there. And, if anybody has any questions or wants to learn more about it, don't hesitate to reach out. We're easily, you can contact us pretty easy. If you don't know how to get a hold of us, just get a hold of Jay. He's got my personal information now, so I don't know what to expect, but
probably a lot of stupid questions, right?
Yeah, probably a lot of stupid questions, but that's what we're here for. So I really do appreciate everything that you're doing with this podcast and being here and taking having myself on here. And unfortunately, you have Jason, he's going to be on too. He's a painter. I mean, let's be honest, the body men are way cooler. Paint is simply scuffing bumpers and masking cars, worst thing in the world. But no, it's all good. It's all good.
Can't wait for that episode with Jason too. Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure, and hope to do it again sometime.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.